And if you can kind of start wrapping it up, get one more piece of dessert, another cup of coffee, about 5 or 6 minutes, we're going to start the show back on. Thank you very much. Oh, believe me, I do that. Then I have to remind myself.
Yeah. Well, I'd rather be a couple minutes early than.
Somebody told me Georgia won 32 to 42. Oh no, 42 to. They told me something. 17.
Yeah, they won.
Yeah, they won. That's the bottom line. Yeah. I'm gonna. Yeah, let me wait his space here for a second.
Yes. Yeah.
I just gave him 5 minutes. It's 7:25. We start around 7:30.
Gentlemen, okay, so for playing the inductees, you're going to read the name, so what's your narration? Okay, so what?
Yes, sir.
I got a friend of mine with me that was responsible for most of getting delays. So can both of us come up?
We only have the inductee come up because it'd be too many. We have sometimes we'll have 5 or 6 family members and all kinds of stuff.
Well, I'm the one accepted.
Oh, you're accepted?
Yeah.
Okay, well then it'll be you. Yeah. We just have one come up.
If it's okay if we don't play them back to the system, because that's going to let me come in.
question. Or tell me something. There you go. There you go. Have you realized? I don't know. Joe, where do you want to be during the? Okay, she's gonna be down here. I'm sorry, I thought you were gonna be up there. We got about 2 minutes, please.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I am standing up.
He said, "Get on the chair, you'll." I just. Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention, please, ask you to take a seat. We're fixing to start the rest of the program. The real reason we're here, food is just part of being an American, I guess. we like to eat and drink a lot. First thing that I would like to do is to acknowledge some people that have been very good to us for 5 years. This is our 5th year, 6th year of the Hall of Fame, but our 5th year here. And the first year we came, we fell in love with this place and the folks that have put this together tonight. And so at this time, I would like to acknowledge the staff that does this. They are fabulous. The food's good, but I promise you, they are fabulous. So enjoy working with them every year. They've been really a blessing. I want to talk to you just a few minutes about what we're doing here tonight and how we got here. The first thing I want to ask is, though, would all of the previous inductees, not the one tonight, the previous inductees, would you please stand where you are? There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. When we started this 6 years ago, it was started literally on a wing and a prayer. None of us had ever done a Hall of Fame. Wasn't sure, how it would work or what we would do. But the first thing we had to find out, was there a Hall of Fame, a military Hall of Fame in Georgia? And there was not. And there was a local senator that was the chair of the Military Affairs Board. I guess that's the name of it, whatever it was. And so we requested to meet with that board. And the chairman of that board, after I gave him my vision of what I wanted to do, he said, how much money do you want from the government? And I said, I don't want any money from the government. He said, you're in. And so Senator Harbison will be up here passing out the goodies, but that's him right there, a friend of the Hall of Fame, I'll promise you. And a real friend of Georgia, tremendous human being, senator of the whole 9 yards. Get him to tell you stories about his mama. You'll see why he was an exemplary Marine. It was easy being a Marine after being raised by his mama. He said, you didn't mess with his mama. At this time, I also want to recognize two groups of, I think there's just young men this time, who are military cadets. The Lyman Ward Military Academy over in Camp Hill, Alabama, and the Riverside Military Academy up in North Georgia. If you guys would stand up, please. If any of you have a young lady in the house that's not married, none of them are married. I checked. And they're all good-looking young men. Okay, one of the things I would like to do now is to ask, the inductees will be coming up here one at a time, but I want to ask as a group if the people being inducted tonight would please stand up. The inductees, please stand up. I tell you, we're very fortunate in the state of Georgia. We're a very patriotic state, and we have some of the most outstanding veterans and young soldiers today, I'm sure, but veterans. I've met many of them over the years, not only doing this, but going to other type military reunions, and we're very fortunate, very, very supportive of each other. Anything that we can do, we get a lot of nominations. For example, North Georgia College is the military college here in Georgia, and there's a contingent of them here. If you would stand up, please. They're very supportive, and we really appreciate their support. I appreciate them so much. My son went there on a full scholarship, and my grandson is going there right now on a full scholarship. So I love North Georgia College. Really do appreciate great school, great camaraderie amongst the graduates. My son and grandson both are in love with it. About 5 years ago, I said we started on Wing and a Prayer. About 5 years ago, 6 years ago, my wife and I had the opportunity to attend a induction ceremony for a Hall of Fame. And I saw an event there that really touched my heart. Living around Fort Benning here, we see heroes come through and go and retire here. Old Bill Spees, God bless him. I don't know if you can see him. He's about this tall, but a Ranger Hall of Fame. We've got some great military people here in this area, in Halls of Fame and other places. But this was a kind of an off-state Arkansas, and there's nothing there. I mean, I think Jacksonville Air Force Base, I believe, in North Little Rock, but they were inducting some veterans. And there was an old fella there, he kind of scraggly looking, probably a Marine, kind of looked like he's mad about something, but the grandkids were just climbing all over him, pulling his hair and carrying on. And so when they called out Grandpa's name and he went up to the front, and these kids kind of locked in place. They began watching, why was Grandpa going up there? And when they started reading what Grandpa had accomplished, I saw these kids change from just little kids to admirers of this hero. This man had done tremendous things and was well worthy of being in the Hall of Fame. And that touched me so that I began thinking, I wonder if Georgia has a military Hall of Fame. And so that was the motivation. That was the initial spark that lit the fire in me to start this thing. And then fortunately, my wife, who is my guide for about everything, recommended Rick White to be on the board with me, another fella, Paul Barnes, a Navy guy, and Chip back here, and some of the original people. And we got together, and and they said, I said, would you like to be on a board of directors? And they said, yeah, I guess so. I said, well, give me $1,000 and you can be on it. Everybody chipped in $1,000, and that was our seed money. That's what we started with. We didn't have anything else. And we started, and we went to this man, and he offered us money, and we said, no, we don't want any government money. We're not going to mess this thing up. So he said, you're smart. So we took it from there, and tonight we're doing our 6th one. We have had 255 nominations come in. And I had to quit reading them. At the first year, I started trying to read them, and I wanted to put everybody in. I mean, really, I love veterans. I owe my life to veterans, come to think of it. Air Force veterans, Navy guys off of the Coral Sea flew over and bombed us and saved us, bombed the bad guys off of us. And the Marines were at Quezon, where we could make a rendezvous point to get to. I love all veterans, all of them. But I realized, look, I can't put everybody in. So the sweet spot in the Georgia Military Veterans Hall of Fame is the Independent Selection Committee. And I won't ask them if they're here. I mean, I don't know if they're here, but I won't ask them to stand up, because the Independent Selection Committee is known only to the secretary of the board. He's the only one that deals with each one of them independently. They don't deal with each other. I don't know who anybody else is. Each board member has one appointee to the Independent Selection Committee. And those are the people that honored you tonight, those of you being inducted. Some of you come up and said, thank you for putting me in. I didn't put you in, you put yourself in. Because if you get through this Independent Selection Committee, they don't know who you are. There's not a picture involved. All they get is the write-up that is submitted. And I encourage you, if you know someone that is a great veteran, and that means they served and did their job, submit them. And at least it'll be an honor to them to have been nominated for the Hall of Fame. And if they get in, it will be on what they've accomplished in their life, not because they knew somebody or paid somebody or anything else. Because that Independent Selection Committee, that's one vote at a time, separate from all the other votes. And so if you're going into the Hall of Fame tonight, or if you've been put in before, you deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. Let's give them a hand. I'll tell you. Of the 255 nominations, we're putting in our 100th inductee tonight, 6 years. And like I say, I wish we could put all 250 of them in. And here's another thing that we did. We realized that some years there's more competition than others. So if you're nominated, you actually get 3 looks. You get 3 looks. The first look, and then there's an executive committee that will reevaluate. And we make sure that, for example, if we have 26 people nominated, it comes back, and number 12 and number 14 have really low rating from one member of the ISA, another one, but then they're pretty high otherwise. We will read that and reevaluate it. And we reserve the right to make certain that it's all fair. There's no decisions whatsoever that are made based on anything other than performance as written up in that document. And so the 100th person going in tonight will conclude the 6th year. We've put in 14 medals of honor. Some of the halls of fame put the medals of honor in automatically at one time. And I think that steals from the family getting the pleasure of watching their loved one inducted. I really didn't feel good about that. We debated it. Some of the board thought it was just go ahead and bring them all. But the longer we thought about it, talked about it, we put them in. They get in there. Now, they don't compete. Don't get me wrong. If you got the Medal of Honor, you can stand tall. You're going in the Hall of Fame. I mean, there's no questions asked. But you got to be nominated. And the one thing you got to have is a DD 214 that confirms what you're saying. And so we put in 14 Medals of Honor. 2 are going in tonight. Unfortunately, many of them don't get to enjoy it, because sometimes when you earn the Medal of Honor, it's at the cost of your life. And so we don't always get to have the Medal of Honor honorees here, but we have a family member. And that's just, to me, that's sweet. That's so nice to do that. We have 3 categories: valor, achievement, and service. We've put in 54 for valor. That doesn't include the Medals of Honor. They're above and beyond. That's why we have 17 tonight. We put in 15 each class, but the Medals of Honor are free on top. They don't take anybody else's spot. So if you earn it, you get in. 10 achievement and 22 service. Just an example of achievement. One of the achievements tonight, some of you may have, well, many of you probably heard of Charging Charlie Beckwith. Charlie Beckwith could have probably gone in under any category you wanted. But I tell you, the most impressive thing in America today, fighting our wars, are the Spec Ops guys. Charlie Beckwith founded, developed, directed, and actually set the blessing over Delta Force. And I tell you, that is an achievement to do what he did. If you want to read an interesting book about how the military and the civilians can get in conflict, read his book, Delta Force. That's the name of the book. I just finished reading it the second time because I wanted to be fresh on it tonight. The last thing that I want to say to you is I want to tell you that unfortunately one of the ladies that worked with us just wonderfully dedicated herself. This morning when she got up, she found her husband hanging inside the house. After she went to bed, he hung himself. And so I want you to join me. You can just pray silently, but I'm going to pray for her, not by name or anything. I don't want to embarrass anybody. But that would be a tremendous blow for a young woman to walk in and see her husband hanging like that. And so if you would, join me in an attitude of prayer, please. Father God, I thank you for this young lady. I thank you for her commitment to the school system and to the government and to her family. And Lord, I ask that you somehow bring peace into this situation and get her through this and let her realize that she is in no way responsible whatsoever. And don't let her take any blame or shame. And we thank you for that in the name of Jesus. Amen. We're gonna start the induction now.
Paul pointed out and introduced Senator Ed Harbison. He allowed me to say something else about Senator Harbison. You'll notice when he comes up there, now we always want to have a representative of the state government, not that we, as Paul said, are funded by, but we are sanctioned by the Secretary of State, the Senate, the House, and the governor. I mean, so we're as good as legal as we can be. But when you see Ed Harbison coming up here, you'll notice he'll have a medallion around his neck because he's a former inductee. It has nothing to do with that title in front of his name, Senator. It has to do because he is a Vietnam veteran, United States Marine Corps, Purple Heart recipient. He earned it in that manner, not for any other. And so, sir, thank you for what you do for this Hall of Fame. This he didn't have to tell me tonight, but we were in conversation. He said, you know, I'm so proud of this thing. Everywhere I'm going around this state, and even when I talk to my colleagues in the Senate and the House, I talk about and encourage them about the Hall of Fame. So for that, I thank him. Let me just tell you how this thing will go tonight. We have this big screen up here. I will say an individual's name and their picture will go up. It's the same picture you have in your program. I will read that citation. What you see in your program is not the citation that I'm reading. Because of space limitations, you're seeing 7 lines exactly. What I will read is what will go up into the Hall of Fame, which is located in the Floyd Veterans Building, downtown Atlanta, across the street from the state capitol. So that picture you see and this citation you will hear is what will be permanently installed into the Hall of Fame. Along the February time frame, there will be an unveiling ceremony for these 17 that you see here tonight. Already there's 83 in the Floyd Veterans Building. If you ever get a chance and you're in the Atlanta area, and do it during the week because it's a government building, so they're not open on the weekend, make a point to go into the Floyd Building and see these that have been inducted, and you'll also see the Medal of Honor recipients from our state that are also in that building. It's a very humbling place to go to, and I would encourage you, if you can, go there. Also, if you're a part of the school system, I know a lot of schools, you'll see yellow school buses around the state capitol throughout the year. We encourage people of education system to let their young people see how the people that have paid the price, that they can sit in that desk in the school systems across this state and get an education. And that's the people that made it happen. So the picture will go up. I will read the citation. When I finish reading the citation, the person that is receiving on behalf of those that were killed in action or those that have deceased will come forward. Senator Harbison will present that person the medallion, the certificate, and coin. They will turn around, they'll have a picture taken, and they will go back to their seat. They will be escorted by the junior ROTC cadets, one per. With that, Charlie Alvin Beckwith Achievement. United States Army Colonel Charlie Alvin Beckwith, retired from Atlanta, is posthumously inducted into the Georgia Military Veterans Hall of Fame for 2018 for his 29-plus years of extraordinary and visionary achievements as an infantry and special forces Green Beret leader and as the founder and legendary commander of our nation's premier counter-terrorist unit, Delta Force. After his early years in Atlanta, during which he attended Boys High School, he was awarded a full football scholarship to the University of Georgia. After graduation, he declined an offer to play pro football, but chose rather the selfless life of a soldier. He spent many formative years training as a Ranger and Green Beret, and later even with the British SAS. His career included 2 combat tours in Vietnam, serving as both a Green Beret team leader and as battalion commander in the 101st Airborne Division. At that time, he was awarded the Combat Infantryman's Badge, Purple Heart, Bronze Star Medal for Valor, Distinguished Flying Cross, and our nation's 3rd highest award for valor, 2 Silver Stars. In the 70s, as our nation and world faced the ever-increasing threat of terrorism, and due to the unparalleled experience in unconventional warfare and special operations, Colonel Beckwith was selected by the Chief of Staff of the Army to create a highly trained, elite, and unmatched counter-terrorist unit, which became known as Delta Force. He went on to lead Delta during many important, high-risk, highly classified, and complex missions throughout the world in order to protect the lives of Americans and our allies. The innovation, techniques, and skills taught and demonstrated by Colonel Beckwith and those that he courageously inspired and led eventually became a key factor in the creation of the United States Joint Special Operations Command and the United States Special Operations Command, both of which continue today quietly and effectively protecting Americans. Accepting tonight on behalf of the late Colonel Beckwith is his daughter, Miss Connie Beckwith Howe. William Maud Bryant, Medal of Honor, killed in action. United States Army Sergeant First Class William Maud Bryant from Cochran is posthumously inducted into the Georgia Military Veterans Hall of Fame class of 2018. Medal of Honor citation. Sergeant First Class Bryant distinguished himself by conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity in Vietnam while acting as a Green Beret commander with a civilian irregular defense group. On the 24th of March, 1969, his unit came under heavy enemy fire and was surrounded by 3 regiments. During the next 34 hours of incessant attack, he displayed extraordinary heroism as he moved throughout his unit's position, not heeding the intense hostile fire, while establishing defensive positions, directing fire, distributing ammunition, aiding the wounded, and providing inspirational leadership and undaunted courage. After running through enemy fire to retrieve ammunition boxes, followed by a helicopter drop, he led a patrol outside the perimeter to obtain information on the enemy. The patrol came under intense fire and was pinned down until he single-handedly repulsed the attack, and by his heroic action inspired his men to fight off other assaults. Later, in a daring attempt to break through the enemy encirclement, he led his men over 200 meters before again being pinned down by intense fire. Severely wounded by the volley of fire, he rallied his men, called for gunship support, and directed suppressive fire upon the enemy. Following the last gunship attack, he fearlessly charged an enemy automatic weapons position, overran it, and single-handedly destroyed its defenders. Inspired by his heroic example, his men renewed their attack on the enemy. While regrouping his small force for the final assault against the enemy, he fell mortally wounded by an enemy rocket. Sergeant First Class Bryant's selfless concern for his comrades at the cost of his very own life, above and beyond the call of duty, is in keeping with the highest traditions of the military service and reflects great credit upon himself, his unit, and the United States Army. His combat awards are Combat Infantryman's Badge, Purple Heart, and the Medal of Honor. Accepting tonight on behalf of Sergeant First Class William Maud Bryant is the Command Sergeant Major of the 5th Special Forces Group at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, Command Sergeant Major David Lance. By the way, the citation and so forth will be added to the 5th Special Forces Group Museum at Fort Campbell. Richard Bernard Dix, achievement. United States Army Brigadier General retired Richard Bernard Dix from Brookhaven is inducted into the Georgia Military Veterans Hall of Fame class of 2018 for his 30-plus years of dedicated active duty service, leading strategic logistics units ranging in size from 200 to over 73,000 soldiers and civilians in both peace and war. Of these 3 decades of service to our nation and to those he led, over 1/3 of those years were overseas, with many in combat zones. Early in his career, he served in Germany and with the peacekeeping mission in Croatia. Later, his notable and exemplary leadership, skill, and logistics expertise was constantly on demand and urgently needed as he was continually placed in critical command positions in the conflicts of Desert Shield, Desert Storm, Afghanistan, and Iraq, as well as the adjacent supporting countries of Kuwait, Qatar, Saudi Arabia. While in Afghanistan, he, in addition to commanding over 40,000 personnel spread over 100 base camps and located in 4 countries, he created a unique Afghan apprenticeship program which developed skilled workers and trained locals in jobs that greatly added to the country's economic growth, in addition to enhancing the relationship between our 2 countries. Toward the end of his career, he greatly contributed to the desperate humanitarian relief effort and urgent fight against the spread of the deadly disease Ebola in West Africa. Because of his tireless dedication to duty and to those he exemplarily led, all military branches of the United States and our allies enjoyed an unmatched level of support necessary for success on unforgiving battlefields and afterwards in nation-building and peacekeeping missions. In retirement, he is a role model for our youth as he continually speaks and mentors hundreds of high school junior ROTC students throughout the United States. General Richard Dix is the epitome of a selfless servant, leader, and one that has never stopped serving mankind and his country. Harold Bascom Durham, Medal of Honor, killed in action. United States Army Second Lieutenant Harold Bascom Durham from Tifton is posthumously inducted into the Georgia Military Veterans Hall of Fame class of 2018. Medal of Honor citation. Second Lieutenant Harold Bascom Durham distinguished himself by conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the cost of his life above and beyond the call of duty. On 17 October 1967, Lieutenant Durham was serving as a forward observer with Company D, 2nd Battalion, 28th Infantry Regiment of the 1st Infantry Division during a battalion mission. Mid-morning, contact was made with an enemy force concealed in well camouflaged and fortified bunkers. Lieutenant Durham immediately moved to an exposed position to adjust needed supporting artillery fire onto the enemy, and then he administered first aid to the wounded in spite of heavy enemy sniper fire directed directly at him. As enemy units assaulted, he learned that Company A had lost its forward observer. While he was moving to replace the wounded observer, the enemy detonated a claymore mine, wounding him in the head and impairing his vision. In spite of the intense pain, he continued to direct the supporting artillery fire and to fire his rifle at the enemy. When the battle intensified, he called for supporting fire to be placed almost directly on his own position, causing the enemy to be driven back. Even in his extremely weakened condition, he continued to call fire on the enemy and positioned himself in an open area which offered a better vantage point to adjust fire. Again, he was wounded by enemy machine gun fire. On the ground, near death, he saw two enemy approaching and shooting defenseless, wounded men. With his last effort, he shouted a warning to his nearby soldiers, who immediately killed the enemy. He died moments later, still grasping the radio handset. Second Lieutenant Durham's gallant action in close combat with an enemy force are in keeping with the highest tradition of the military service and reflect great credit upon himself, his unit, and the United States Army. His combat awards are Bronze Star Medal for Valor, Purple Heart, and the Medal of Honor. Accepting tonight on behalf of Second Lieutenant Durham is his brother John Durham and his sister Jeannie Durham Horton. I'm going to be selfish right now. I'm going to ask you to, and I'm serious, say a silent prayer for me. Because soldiers don't cry, but my sweaty eyeballs are starting to affect my reading. And you can't go through this stuff without being affected. Thank you for that. Rondell Howard Glaze, Valor, killed in action. United States Army Private Rondell Howard Glaze from Cleveland is posthumously inducted into the Georgia Military Veterans Hall of Fame, class of 2018, for his undaunted and extraordinary heroism during actions near Lixing, France on the 17th of February, 1945, during World War II. Soon after his 18th birthday, at the height of World War II, Ronald Glaze volunteered and enlisted in the United States Army. Following in processing at Fort McPherson in August 1944 and basic training at Camp Hood, Texas in September 44, Private Glaze sailed overseas in January 45 as a member of Company A, 275th Infantry Regiment, 70th Infantry Division, where he served as a rifleman. On the ground for less than a month in the European theater of operations, Private Glaze soon found himself in a company attack against stiff German resistance and murderous enemy machine gun fire, which had halted his unit's advance. Realizing the extreme gravity of the situation, without hesitation, Private Glaze voluntarily assumed the task of knocking out the hostile, murderous weapon. With no concern for his own safety, Private Glaze crawled across open terrain while continually exposed to enemy machine gun, mortar, artillery, and rifle fire. Although seriously wounded from machine gun fire and artillery shrapnel, he continued his one-man assault, crept closer to the deadly bunker, and hurled a grenade inside, instantly killing the enemy. The remainder of his company was then able to rush the enemy position, continue its advance, and gain their hard-fought objective. Private Glaze was found dead next to the machine gun bunker he had destroyed. In addition to the Combat Infantryman's Badge, Bronze Star Medal, and the Purple Heart, and for his selfless act of heroic action of this fearless 18-year-old soldier, Private Glaze was posthumously awarded our nation's second highest award for valor, the Distinguished Service Cross. Accepting tonight on behalf of the Glaze family is former United States Air Force Staff Sergeant, Vietnam War veteran, and President of the Northeast Georgia Veteran Society, Mr. James Webb. Marshal Cicero Huckabee Valor. United States Army First Sergeant retired Marshal Cicero Huckabee from Perry is inducted into the 2018 class of the Georgia Military Veterans Hall of Fame for his numerous acts of selfless service and heroism in connection with military operations against armed enemies of the United States while serving in both the United States Navy and the United States Army. In the Navy, he served aboard the ship USS Dodge during the potential nuclear war period of the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis and the subsequent naval blockade of that country. Ironically, his ship was named for Dodge County, Georgia, and during the uncertain time of the blockade, she carried much of the men in the tanks of the 1st Armored Division, which were poised for use, if necessary, against the Cuban communists and the Soviet forces located there. Immediately after his Navy enlistment, he enlisted and stayed in the United States Army for the remainder of his career. During 3 years in Vietnam, he served as a long-range reconnaissance patrol leader in the 25th, 9th, and 1st Infantry Divisions, and in the 1st Aviation Brigade and the Military Assistance Command, Vietnam. In Vietnam, he received several Valor and Combat Commendation Awards, with the citations consistently speaking about his exemplary display of selflessness, devotion to duty, and undaunted bravery and leadership, especially while under enemy fire. He was twice decorated for heroism and was wounded 4 times, included being bayoneted during hand-to-hand fighting when his position was overrun by a numerically superior North Vietnamese Army force. Since his military retirement, he has continued to serve both active duty members, veterans, and their families through his dedicated involvement with many veteran and charitable organizations, as well as assisting veterans with service-related claims. First Sergeant Marshal Huckabee's combat awards are Combat Infantry Badge, Vietnam Cross of Gallantry, 3 Army Commendation Medals for combat service, 4 Purple Hearts, 2 Bronze Star Medals for combat service, and 2 Bronze Star Medals for valor. Guy Thomas McDonnell Valor. United States Marine Corps Gunnery Sergeant retired Guy Thomas McDonnell from Fitzgerald is inducted into the 2018 class of the Georgia Military Veterans Hall of Fame for his extraordinary heroism in connection with military operations against an armed enemy of the United States while serving with Company H, 2nd Battalion, 5th Marine Regiment, 1st Marine Division during the Vietnam War. In the early morning hours of 30 January 1968, and in the initial launch of the famous and bloody Tet Offensive of that year, then Sergeant McDonnell was serving as a platoon sergeant with his unit's mission of protecting a vital portion of the Trio Bridge over the Perfume River in Hue, South Vietnam. As one of his squads came under intense small arms machine gun and mortar and rocket fire from two attacking North Vietnamese companies, he was seriously wounded during the initial moments of the enemy assault. Although growing weaker from great loss of blood, he refused medical aid and continued to direct his greatly outnumbered force in a desperate defense of the bridge. Despite the heavy volume of enemy fire and with complete disregard for his own safety, he fearlessly and continually moved from one position to another, encouraging his men, directing their fire, adjusting artillery fire on the overwhelming attacking force, redistributing ammunition, and providing first aid. When a portion of the perimeter was about to be penetrated, he quickly moved to that position of the potential breach and boldly stood firing his weapon and throwing hand grenades, which resulted in killing 15 of the enemy soldiers and causing a portion of the enemy to withdraw. Despite his ever-weakening condition, he continued to fight, inspire his outnumbered men to withstand the enemy, and refused medical evacuation until all of his men were relatively safe after reinforcements had arrived. He later served a second combat tour in Vietnam and continued to serve his country until his military retirement in 1983. His combat awards are Combat Action Ribbon, Vietnam Cross of Gallantry, Purple Heart, and our nation's third highest award for valor, the Silver Star. Wiley McGarity Valor. United States Army Colonel retired Wiley McGarity from Atlanta is posthumously inducted into the 2018 class of the Georgia Military Veterans Hall of Fame for his extraordinary heroism in connection with military operations against an armed enemy of the United States while serving with Company F, 2nd Battalion, 17th Infantry Regiment, 7th Infantry Division during the Korean War. Then, First Lieutenant McGarity distinguished himself by extraordinary heroism in action against an enemy force at Pamanggal, Korea on 1 September 1951. On that date, Company F, in defensive positions on a strategic hill, was attacked by an overwhelming hostile force estimated to be over 300 and supported by automatic weapons. After the enemy penetrated the west flank of the company's position, inflicting very heavy casualties and gaining control of key terrain, Lieutenant McGarity, armed only with a pistol and several grenades, braved weathering small arms fire and automatic weapons fire and launched a one-man assault against the enemy. He killed 6 hostile soldiers before his ammunition was expended. Although wounded by grenade fragments, he grabbed abandoned enemy grenades and a discarded carbine and continued to pour deadly accurate fire onto enemy positions until that ammunition was exhausted. Then, seizing an entrenching tool, he closed with fierce hand-to-hand combat, killing 2 more of the enemy. Maintaining his undaunted stand, he inflicted such sweeping destruction that the now hesitant enemy quickly broke off the engagement. When friendly troops reached his position, he was still hurling grenades at the retreating force. His inspirational, intrepid actions exacted a total of approximately 30 enemy dead, and as a result of his incredible display of valor, the vital strong point was re-secured. Colonel McGarity's combat awards are Combat Infantry Badge, Bronze Star Medal for Valor, Purple Heart, and our nation's second highest award for valor, the Distinguished Service Cross. Accepting tonight on behalf of the late Colonel Wiley McGarity is his son, Mr. William McGarity. Benjamin Randolph Mixon Service. United States Army Lieutenant General retired Benjamin Randolph Mixon from Columbus is inducted into the Georgia Military Veterans Hall of Fame for 2018 for his 36 years of dedicated service from 1975 to 2011, and in retirement, his continuous volunteer service to the University of North Georgia. His career included several European assignments, plus multiple combat deployments in the Middle East theater during the conflicts of Desert Shield, Desert Storm, Afghanistan, and Iraq. General Mixon's life of self-sacrifice, devotion to duty, and sincere concern for those he led spanned command and staff positions from platoon through company, battalion, brigade, division, and theater army level, and while in famous and tip-of-the-spear elements of the 82nd Airborne Division, 3rd Infantry Division, 75th Ranger Regiment, 101st Airborne Division, 18th Airborne Corps, and United States Southern Command, and finally, as Commander, the 25th Infantry Division, followed by Commander, United States Army Pacific Command. During the last third of his career, he became one of the Army's senior planners and premier combat leaders during the War on Terror, and one of the first senior leaders calling for and justifying the ultimate and extremely successful Iraq troop surge. General Mixon's lengthy combat command and high-level staff experience led him in retirement to volunteer his knowledge, wise counsel, and service as a member of the University of North Georgia's Foundation Board of Trustees, as well as the Institute for Leadership and Strategic Studies Board. His invaluable help to these two important bodies led to his selection of the University of North Georgia's Presidential Leadership Award for 2015. For his exemplary life and military career of selfless and dedicated service to military men and women, followed now in his invaluable assistance to one of America's leading institutions for leadership development, General Mixon has rightfully earned the high, rare, and noble honor to be inducted into the Georgia Military Veterans Hall of Fame. I might add, General Mixon's father, retired Command Sergeant Major William T. Mixon, was inducted in the second class of the Georgia Military Veterans Hall of Fame in 2014, thus making General Mixon and Command Sergeant Major Mixon the only, so far, father-son team in the Georgia Military Veterans Hall of Fame. Richard Andrew Palmer, Jr., Valor. United States Army Captain Richard Andrew Palmer, Jr. from Macon is inducted into the 2018 class of the Georgia Military Veterans Hall of Fame for his numerous acts of selfless service and heroism in connection with military operations against armed enemies of the United States while serving in Vietnam. On 3 June 1970, while serving as a dust-off helicopter pilot, then First Lieutenant Palmer distinguished himself as he and his crew responded to a call to rescue 5 seriously wounded South Korean Army soldiers whose unit was still receiving intense enemy fire. 3 previous unsuccessful rescue attempts had been made by another dust-off crew, resulting in that aircraft being shot down. Despite poor weather conditions and with a superior enemy force possessing heavy and accurate firepower, First Lieutenant Palmer was determined to attempt this life-saving mission. Skillfully, he maneuvered his aircraft through an intense hail of enemy small arms and machine gun fire, landed, and then resolutely remained on the ground while the 5 wounded Allied soldiers were carefully loaded. He then was able to rescue the other shot-down helicopter and vulnerable air crew. Once all were on board, he once again flew out of and through the kill zone while always being targeted by a hailstorm of enemy firepower and then on to a nearby medical aid facilities. This successful rescue was but one of the more than 800 medical evacuations he conducted while flying 736 combat hours. He and his crew of Dust-Off 106 conducted always dangerous but life-saving missions day after day in order to save the lives of Americans, Allied soldiers, civilians, and even wounded enemy soldiers. Captain Rick Palmer's dedication to his fellow man clearly epitomizes the words found in John 15:13. Greater love hath no man than this, that he lay down his life for his friends. Captain Richard Andrew Palmer, Jr. Combat Awards are the Korean Silver Star, 19 Air Medals, Bronze Star Medal for Combat Service, and our nation's 3rd highest award for valor, the Silver Star. George Robert Partridge, Valor. United States Air Force Lieutenant Colonel retired George Robert Partridge from Doraville is inducted into the 2018 class of the Georgia Military Veterans Hall of Fame for his numerous acts of selfless service and heroism in connection with military operations against armed enemies of the United States while serving in Vietnam. After attending North Georgia College, he enlisted in 1952, was later commissioned, completed pilot training, and eventually retired in 1984, having served a total of over 32 active duty years. On 12 November 1965 in Vietnam, then Captain Partridge was serving as a forward air controller on the ground with an element of the 1st Infantry Division when the unit was attacked by an overwhelming enemy force which threatened to penetrate and overrun the Americans' defensive position. During the early phase of the attack, Captain Partridge was wounded. Disregarding his injury and leaving a relatively safe position, he continually exposed himself to deadly hostile fire and automatic weapons fire in order to gain the best vantage point to observe the enemy location and then to effectively coordinate and direct life-saving tactical air support. Because of his devotion to duty, disregard for his own safety, and total focus on the protection of his fellow soldiers and airmen, his effective skill enabled U.S. forces to gain the advantage, turn the tide of the battle, and save an untold number of American lives. Later that month, on 20 November 1965, while flying in a small, unarmed observation aircraft, he again was credited with saving the lives of many Americans who were caught in a deadly vehicle combat ambush. Again, with total disregard for his own safety, he dove his airplane directly at the enemy, causing them to divert their firepower toward him and away from the vehicles on the ground until helicopter gunships and fighter aircraft could arrive. Lieutenant Colonel Parcher's combat awards are Purple Heart, Distinguished Flying Cross, and our nation's third highest award for valor, the Silver Star. Martin Reyna, valor. United States Army Special Forces Lieutenant Colonel retired Martin Reyna from Columbus is inducted into the 2018 class of the Georgia Military Veterans Hall of Fame for his numerous acts of selfless service and heroism in connection with military operations against enemy armed forces of the United States while serving in Vietnam. In 1967, during 67 days of almost continuous combat action, on 7 March, as an infantry platoon leader in the 23rd Infantry Division, then 2nd Lieutenant Reyna's unit came under intense small arms fire from a well-camouflaged enemy ambush. When 2 of his men were struck, unable to move, and exposed to direct enemy fire, he raced across 50 meters of bullet-swept and open terrain to retrieve his soldiers and carry them to safety. He then organized and led an effective counterattack against the ambush and personally eliminated by a 2-man enemy emplacement. On 21 March, he was wounded in the left arm by fragments of an enemy grenade, but refused medical evacuation in order to continue leading his platoon. On 24 March, again his platoon came under intense enemy semi-automatic weapons fire, and once again Lieutenant Reyna bravely led his men against the entrenched enemy and eliminated the threat. On 24 April, his unit, while in defensive position, was attacked by a large enemy force using direct and indirect firepower. As he was directing his soldiers' return fire, he was wounded in the right arm and hand from mortar fragments and was medically evacuated out of the combat zone. On 2 July 1983 in Germany, then Major Reyna immediately responded to a crashed and burning Army Black Hawk helicopter, and with total disregard for his own safety, he rescued the crew members from the wreckage and was later awarded the Army's highest peacetime award for heroism, the Soldier's Medal. Lieutenant Colonel Reyna's combat awards are Combat Infantry Badge, 2 Air Medals, 2 Purple Hearts, Bronze Star Medal for Valor, and our nation's third highest award for valor, the Silver Star. David Forrest Richards, Jr., service. United States Army Chief Warrant Officer 4, retired, David Forrest Jr. from Savannah is inducted in the Georgia Military Veterans Hall of Fame, class of 2018, for his 30 years of dedicated active duty service, and in retirement, his continued devotion to his community. He began his military career as a 17-year-old private in the Western Pacific during World War II, served in Vietnam in the 101st Airborne Division, and finished his career as being recognized as one of the leading, most knowledgeable, and experienced expert on all aspects of military parachutes, including design, engineering, testing, evaluation, maintenance, and safety. As both a master parachutist and master parachute rigger, he amassed over 1,200 static line jumps, of which many were testing new equipment which would eventually be used by our airborne forces. During assignments with the Airborne Test and Evaluation Board and with the Natick Research and Development Labs, CW4 Richards assisted with the development and testing of individual and heavy equipment parachutes. A large and unknown number of parachute operations have been made safer, and many lives have been saved by his dedicated devotion to excellence. He truly epitomized the rigger's motto of, "I will be sure, always." For his contributions to the improvement of airborne operations, he was the first African American to be inducted into the Parachute Rigger Warrant Officers Hall of Fame, and is also a recipient of the Distinguished Order of St. Martin, which is presented to those who have made significant contribution to the Army Quartermaster Corps. As a citizen of Savannah and Chatham County, Mr. Richards served in various roles in many prominent civic organizations. In recognition of his service to his fellow citizens, in 2008, he was selected to be the Grand Marshal for the Chatham County Veterans Day Parade. For his exemplary life of selfless and dedicated service, David Forrest Richards, Jr. has rightfully earned the rare and noble honor to be inducted into the Georgia Military Veterans Hall of Fame. Due to a recent fall resulting in a broken hip, Mr. Richards, age 89, cannot be with us tonight. Accepting on his behalf is his oldest child of 3 and only son, Reverend David Forrest Richards III. Lamar Clarence Smith, Valor. United States Air Force Captain Lamar Clarence Smith from Gordon is inducted in the 2018 class of the Georgia Military Veterans Hall of Fame for his numerous acts of selfless service and undaunted heroism in connection with military operations against armed enemies of the United States in Southeast Asia. Upon graduation from Georgia State University, he was commissioned, earned his wings, and soon departed for 12 months of combat flying. The unit he flew with was the Air Force Special Operations Command, and the aircraft he flew was the heavily armed, prop-driven World War II era Douglas A-1 Skyraider. To place in perspective the dangerous missions that the brave crews of this unit and their planes were tasked to perform, this aircraft lost to enemy action was approximately 1/3 of the fleet, and likewise the pilot's loss rate was in excess of 1 killed in action out of every 5 that flew. However, Lamar Smith, like his fellow pilots, continued to place the lives of others over self, and he continually flew on search and rescue missions to help protect and retrieve downed aircraft crews, and also provide relentless attacks on enemy targets during close air support missions for ground forces. Many of the rescue missions, especially in North Vietnam, were flown at treetop level, in foul weather, in darkness, and with enemy in immediate range of enemy guns and missiles. During his tour, he completed 117 air combat missions, 17 of which were over North Vietnam. His fearless efforts were credited with saving the lives of countless downed airmen and ground troops. Most noteworthy was in a 57-day period of constant combat when then First Lieutenant Smith went on a flurry of gallantry as he was awarded 19 medals for heroism and airmanship. The similar theme that runs throughout these citations was his focused determination to save the lives of his fellow Americans, regardless of the cost to himself, including his own life. His combat awards are 11 Air Medals, 6 Distinguished Flying Crosses, and our nation's third highest award for valor, 2 Silver Stars. Orson George Swindle III, Valor. United States Marine Corps Lieutenant Colonel, retired Orson George Swindle III from Camilla is inducted in the 2018 class of the Georgia Military Veterans Hall of Fame for his many acts of selfless service, undaunted heroism, and unwielding devotion to his fellow service members in connection with military operations against armed enemies of the United States in Southeast Asia, and subsequently as a prisoner of war in North Vietnam. Upon graduation from Georgia Tech in 1959, he was commissioned, earned his Navy wings in 1964, and later flew the F-8 Echo Crusader on 204 missions in combat. On Veterans Day, 11 November 1966, then Captain Swindle was shot down over North Vietnam and was captured. For the following 6 years, 4 months, and 4 days, he endured a continuous, hellish, and inhumane nightmare of beatings, hundreds of hours of interrogation, torture, wounding, deprivation at the hands of his communist captors in the prison infamously known as the Hanoi Hilton. Throughout these seemingly endless sessions, he was able to convince his captors that his shrewdly fabricated false and plausible details to be factual and were interpreted by his interrogators as totally factual and proved to be the great value for survival of his fellow POWs. Upon threat of death, Captain Swindle nonetheless assumed complete care of other sick and wounded fellow prisoners. The nightmare finally ended on 4 March 1973, with he and his other POWs were repatriated. Undaunted by his interminable and harrowing experience as a POW, he returned to flying, this time in the A-4 Skyhawk. After his medical retirement in 1979, Lieutenant Colonel Swindle continued to serve in the public sector and twice served as presidential appointee positions. For his unflinching and constant courage as a prisoner of war, he was awarded the Prisoner of War Medal, Navy Commendation for Valor, 13 Air Medals, 2 Purple Hearts, 2 Bronze Star medals for valor, 2 Legions of Merit, and our nation's 3rd highest award for valor, 2 Silver Stars. John Edwin Taylor III, Valor. United States Army Staff Sergeant John Edwin Taylor III from Atlanta is posthumously inducted into the 2018 class of the Georgia Military Veterans Hall of Fame for his numerous acts of selfless service and heroism in connection with military operations against enemy armed forces of the United States in South Vietnam and in the Republic of Cambodia. A 1967 graduate of North Druid Hills High School, he also attended Georgia Southwestern College prior to entering the Army in 1968. Upon arrival in Vietnam in late 1969, he was assigned to the 1st Cavalry Division. Because of his obvious, effective, and exemplary leadership capabilities, calmness and unflinching courage, even in the face of determined, numerically superior, and well-armed enemy forces, coupled with his sound technical and tactical proficiency, he quickly worked his way up in ranks as an infantry leadership positions from team leader, squad leader, and finally as a platoon sergeant, with the huge responsibility of the lives of over 30 other men. At this point, John Taylor had just turned 20 years of age and was in a leadership position normally held by a career sergeant first class, much older and with many more years of military service. On 9 April 1970 in Vietnam and on 9 July 1970 in Cambodia, his natural leadership ability and gallantry were on full display as he engaged in fierce fighting with well-trained soldiers of the North Vietnamese Army. On both of these actions, he, with total disregard for his own safety, but with only concern for the safety and protection of his men and an adjacent platoon, took on the lead element of an enemy machine gun that was causing many American casualties. By charging the enemy and laying down an effective base of suppressive fire, he single-handedly turned the tide, allowing his men to gain control of these firefights and totally eliminate the imposing threat. His combat awards are Combat Infantry Badge, Army Commendation for Valor, Air Medal, Bronze Star Medal for Combat Service, and our nation's 3rd highest award for valor, the Silver Star. Accepting tonight on behalf of the late Staff Sergeant John Edwin Taylor III are his 2 sons, Mr. Matt Taylor and Mr. Ryan Taylor. Jerry Allen White service. And I might add, this is the 100th inductee into the Hall of Fame. United States Army Major General retired Jerry Allen White from Columbus is inducted into the Georgia Military Veterans Hall of Fame for 2018 for his 34 years of dedicated active duty service, and in retirement, his continued volunteer service for over 20 years to the greater Columbus area. Although General White was nominated in the service category, his life and career could have just as easily been made his nomination either of the other two categories of valor or achievement. As an airborne and Ranger qualified officer, he served 2 years in Vietnam, first in the 101st Airborne Division and later in the 23rd Infantry Division. During both tours, he amassed an impressive record of many awards for valor as he led his men in tough fighting against the determined forces of the North Vietnam Army and the South Vietnamese Communists. For example, on 26 July 1966, then Captain White courageously led his company of paratroopers in a fierce counterattack when one of his platoons was pinned down by unrelenting automatic fire. His inspirational leadership called all of his men to quickly rally and soundly defeat the enemy. In addition to numerous commands from platoon to division, as well as many high-level staff positions, toward the end of his impressive career, he commanded the 7th Infantry Division at Fort Ord, California, immediately followed by command of the Army Infantry Center and Fort Benning. After retirement, and having become a very active citizen and driving force in Columbus, he served as executive director of United Way for 7 years, raising millions to support charities, and as chairman and president of the National Infantry Foundation, where he spearheaded the building effort of the National Infantry Museum and Soldiers Center, a national treasure which has been cited by the Smithsonian Institute as the finest military museum in the nation. General White's combat awards are Combat Infantry Badge, Army Commendation for Valor, Soldier's Medal, Air Medal for Valor, Bronze Star Medal for Valor, and the Silver Star. Due to the recent, sudden, sad, and tragic death of his son, Major General White could not be with us here tonight. Accepting on his behalf is his close friend, former Columbus Mayor, retired Army Colonel, and previous Georgia Military Veterans Hall of Fame inductee, Bob Poityshev. Let's give our people that helped us up here in front a good hand. Before we have closing remarks and the closing prayer, at the end, please don't jump up and leave, because here's why. We would request that all inductees for this year and the ones that accepted on behalf of and former inductees, please come forward for a group photograph. So if we could ask your indulgence on everybody else remaining where you are, we'd appreciate that. So in past years, we missed that opportunity. We don't want to do that this year. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your support of being here tonight. Thank you for being the Americans that you are. You did not see history made tonight. You heard history explained tonight by selfless servants of our country. And people ask me, what have I done since I've retired from the Army? I said, I got the best paying job that I don't get a nickel for, because you can't pay somebody to do what you get to love and honor these veterans. I thank you for being here tonight. I thank you for supporting this organization. And you need to be proud as Georgians and anybody that loves a veteran that this state has the Georgia Military Veterans Hall of Fame. One last comment. In past years, people have asked, could we get a coin? You know, the coins are handed out. The things that were handed out here tonight was the medallion, the certificate, and a coin. You may have a coin if you would like to remember this event. Paul Longer will be up here at the front, so if you'd like to get one of those, they're not free, but people have asked us, could we have them or get one, and so that's how you can do it. Paul will be up here by the stage. With that, if all handkerchiefs are full of tears and tissues are full of tears, we will now have our closing prayer. And I think Paul is going to do that. Paul, where are you? You want to do the closing prayer, sir? This man needs a round of applause for starting the Hall of Fame.
Join me in an attitude of prayer, please. Everybody, please stand up. You know, we live in the greatest country in the world, and God has really blessed this country. And I think we need to constantly be blessing God. And so I want you to take an attitude of prayer with me, please. And I'm going to just speak a blessing over what God has done here with this, and especially these great Americans that are here tonight, each of you honoring these great Americans. Join me in an attitude of prayer. Father God, we stand in awe of the things you do daily. And sometimes we take them for granted, and Lord, forgive us for that. Lord, we acknowledge that without you, most of us wouldn't even be here. And our wives would be widows, the children would be fatherless, and in some cases, even the ladies serving in the military. And so, Lord, we thank you for that privilege. We do not take that cheaply. We take it at a great expense of what a free country costs. So we thank you for the privilege of all these veterans that are here tonight, these people that are here to honor those veterans, but especially those of us that couldn't be here tonight, that gave their lives for this country. And so I ask a blessing on each of these people as they go home tonight. Give them safe driving and safe drivers around them. In the name of Jesus, amen.
Okay, if we would have all the inductees or those that received on behalf of and former inductees, please come up to the center in front of the stage for photographs.